Shore. Welcome back to 3rd grade online. I'm Miss Nazaripour. For this activity today, we're going to do a read aloud. You will need a pencil and something to write on. I will have some comprehension questions at the end for you, just like always. So if you have all of those things, let's get started. If not, pause the video and go get what you need. Okay. All right, 3rd graders, I bet you can guess what book we're going to read today. Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum is a book by Kevin Hankey. I particularly enjoy this book because of its well-developed characters. As you know, in school we've been talking about how to really develop a character, an author has to give them thoughts and dialogue that's speaking, and lots of actions and also lots of feelings. Chrysanthemum in this book has lots of feelings, and it helps us know who she is on the inside. And that's so important for a reader to be able to know who a character is on the inside, because it helps us to understand how a character might react in a situation or why they're doing the things they're doing. So some character traits that you may have heard of are brave. Remember when we read Brave Irene? Or shy, or happy. And those can be feeling words, but what a character trait is that's different than a feeling word is that character's that thing most of the time. So like I told you in class, sometimes everybody gets angry, but unless you're angry all the time, that wouldn't be a character trait, right? A character trait is something that describes who you are mostly. So let's read Chrysanthemum and try and figure out who she is mostly. But before we get started, we always read the blurb. Chrysanthemum thinks her name is absolutely perfect until her first day of school. You're named after a flower, teases Victoria. Let's smell her, says Joe. Chrysanthemum wilts. What will it take to make her blossom again? Let's talk about that word because you're going to see it a couple times. Wilts. If you have a flower, after a certain amount of time, it starts to droop and it starts to get lower and its petals start to hang. It looks very unhappy. That's wilting. And when people wilt, I want you to think about their bodies just kind of going down and like all the air coming out of them as the happiness leaves them. And that is what's going to happen to Chrysanthemum in this book. Okay, let's get started. Chrysanthemum by Kevin Hankey. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' lives. She's perfect, said her mother. Absolutely, said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect. Look at that cutie. Her name must be everything she is, said her mother. Her name must be absolutely perfect, said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew. And when she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved her name. So if you take a look in the picture, I see on the top right, I see her learning to crawl, learning to feed herself, learning to walk, it looks like. Here she is playing in the park. Look at those cool glasses on her little tricycle. In the bath, learning to read, growing, and here she says, I love my name. If you take a look at Chrysanthemum in all of these pictures, one thing is the same. She looks happy. I would say that one character trait that describes Chrysanthemum, can you see that? Is happy. She's a happy child. Born into all that love, her parents think she's perfect. She'd have to be happy. She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner. And she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written with ink on an envelope. She loved the way it looked when it was written with icing on her birthday cake. And she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself with her fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. So, I see lots of different times when Chrysanthemum is loving her name. One word that I would say describes who Chrysanthemum is on the inside is proud. She's proud of her name. She's proud of who she is. Now, a lot of times when I say that a character is proud, some of my third graders say, that's not a good thing when you're proud. It means you're boastful or bragging. Sometimes you can be proud without bragging. All it means is that you like yourself, you think you're great, and there's nothing wrong with that. We should like ourselves and think we're great, just like Chrysanthemum does, because we are great. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect. And then she started school. On the first day, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. She ran all the way. Hooray, said Chrysanthemum. School. Third graders, that's how I feel about school right now. But when Mrs. Chud took roll call, everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. Mrs. Chud. And then we have Dawn, Eve, Lois, Al, Les, Kay, Max, Sue, Bill, Pat, Tom, Sam, Ken, Joe, Rita, Victoria, Chrysanthemum. Do you see how long her name is? In comparison to all the other kids, all the other mice? It's so long, said Joe. It scarcely fits on your name tag, said Rita, pointing. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. You're named after a flower. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and informed Mrs. Chud that Chrysanthemum's name was spelled with 13 letters. That's exactly half as many letters as there are in the entire alphabet, Victoria explained. Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria, said Mrs. Chud. Now put your head down. That is so rude. How do you think Chrysanthemum is feeling right now with her? She's trying to take a nap. And you see her, she's right there. And Victoria's standing up talking about her name. That's not very kind. It's not the way a good friend behaves or a good classmate. If I had a name like yours, I'd change it, Victoria said as the students lined up to go home. I wish I could, thought Victoria miserably. Welcome home, said her mother. Welcome home, said her father. School is no place for me, said Chrysanthemum. My name is too long, it scarcely fits on my name tag, and I'm named after a flower. Oh, pish, said her mother. Your name is beautiful, and precious and priceless and fascinating and winsome, said her father. It's everything you are, said her mother. Absolutely perfect, said her father. Chrysanthemum felt much better after her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese with ketchup, and an evening filled with hugs and kisses and parcheesi. So I'm thinking now about how she's behaving after having a really bad day at school, her actions. I'm thinking also about her actions on the way to school, and I think that I have another character trait that might describe Chrysanthemum. Hopeful. I think she's hopeful in the beginning when she thinks she's gonna have an amazing time at school, and I think she's hopeful now that she's starting to feel better with her family. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that her name was Jane. It was an extraordinarily pleasant dream. The next morning, Chrysanthemum wore her most comfortable jumper, another name for a sweater. She walked to school as slowly as she could. She dragged her feet in the dirt. Chrysanthemum, 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 she wrote. Ugh, there she goes to school just being brave. And I found other evidence of her being brave. She wasn't scared of anything before she started school. She was excited about everything she did, learning to ride her bike, learning to walk. She was always very brave. Let's see what happens when she's at school. She even looks like a flower, said Victoria as Chrysanthemum entered the playground. Let's pick her, said Rita, pointing. Let's smell her, said Joe. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. The rest of the day was not much better. During nap time, Victoria raised her hand and said, "A chrysanthemum is a flower. It lives in the garden with worms and other dirty things." "Thank you for sharing that with us, Victoria," said Mrs. Chudd. "Now put your head down." It's not very good teaching from Mrs. Chudd. Was that a very kind thing for Victoria to do? Of course not. And when we see unkind things, we need to say that it's not right. We need to stick up for each other. I'm sorry Mrs. Chudd did not do that. "I just cannot believe your name," Victoria said as the students lined up to go home. "Neither can I," thought Chrysanthemum miserably. "Welcome home," said her mother. "Welcome home," said her father. "School is no place for me," said Chrysanthemum. "They said I even look like a flower. They pretended to pick me and smell me." "Oh, pish," said her mother. "They're just jealous and envious and begrudging and discontented and jaundiced," said her father. "Who wouldn't be jealous of a name like yours?" said her mother. "After all, it's absolutely perfect," said her father. Chrysanthemum felt a trifle, that means a little, she felt a trifle better after her favorite dessert, chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, and another evening filled with hugs, kisses, and parcheesi. All through the book, I've been noticing that Chrysanthemum, even when she's really sad, shows a lot of affection, shows a lot of love for her parents, and accepts a lot of love and affection from them. I would say another word that describes Chrysanthemum is loving. That night, Chrysanthemum dreamed that she really was a chrysanthemum. She sprouted leaves and petals. Victoria picked her and plucked the leaves and the petals one by one until there was nothing left but a scrawny stem. It was the worst nightmare of Chrysanthemum's life. Oh, it's really scary. Chrysanthemum wore her outfit with 7 pockets the next morning. That's the one I drew. She loaded the pockets with her most prized possessions and her good luck charms. Chrysanthemum took the longest route possible to school. She stopped and stared at each and every flower. Chrysanthemum, 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 the flowers seemed to say. That morning, students were introduced to Mrs. Twinkle, the music teacher. Her voice was like something out of a dream, as was everything else about her. The students were speechless. They thought Mrs. Twinkle was an indescribable wonder. They went out of their way to make a nice impression. Mrs. Twinkle led the students in scales. Then she assigned roles for the class musical. Victoria was chosen to be the dainty fairy queen. Rita was chosen to be the spiffy butterfly princess. Joe was chosen to be the all-important pixie messenger. And Chrysanthemum was chosen to be a daisy, another kind of flower. Chrysanthemum's a daisy, chrysanthemum's a daisy, Joe, Rita, and Victoria chanted, thinking it was wildly funny. Chrysanthemum wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. What's so humorous, Funny? What's so humorous? Asked Mrs. Twinkle. Chrysanthemum was the answer. Her name is so long, said Joe. It scarcely fits on a name tag, said Rita, pointing. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. She's named after a flower. Let's see if this teacher behaves better than Mrs. Chudd did. My name is Long, said Mrs. Twinkle. It is, said Joe. My name would scarcely fit on a name tag, said Mrs. Twinkle. It would, said Rita, pointing. And, said Mrs. Twinkle, I'm named after a flower, too. You are, said Victoria. Yes, said Mrs. Twinkle. My name is Delphinium, Delphinium Twinkle. And if my baby is a girl, I'm considering Chrysanthemum as a name. I think it's absolutely perfect. Good job, Miss Twinkle. Chrysanthemum could scarcely believe her ears. She blushed, she beamed, she bloomed. Chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum, chrysanthemum. All it took was one person to stand up for her to remind her that she is pretty special, that she is happy and proud and brave and hopeful and loving. Don't we all deserve that? Somebody to stick up for us? Good job, Mrs. Twinkle. Joe, Rita, and Victoria looked at Chrysanthemum longingly. That means they looked at her with want. They wanted something she had. Call me Marigold, said Joe. I'm Carnation, said Rita, pointing. My name is Lily of the Valley, said Victoria. Chrysanthemum did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She knew it. Epilogue. Overall, the class musical was a huge success. Chrysanthemum was absolutely perfect as a daisy. Victoria made the only mistake. She completely forgot her lines as the dainty fairy queen. Chrysanthemum thought it was wildly funny, and she giggled throughout the entire Dance of the Flowers. Eventually, Mrs. Twinkle gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and of course, she named her Chrysanthemum. What a lovely book. What a lovely character. I particularly enjoy how Kevin Hankey always makes his characters come to life by giving them lots of actions, thoughts, feelings, and dialogue speaking. Okay, now I have a couple questions for you about Chrysanthemum. In your journal, go ahead and turn to the next space you have available, the next blank page. Write the date. It's 3-27-20. Write the title of the book. I'll let you read this one. So you can pause it and write that title down. Once you have, you're going to answer these two questions. The first question is, why did Chrysanthemum's classmates stop making fun of her name? I want you to think back into the book. What happened that caused them to stop making fun of Chrysanthemum? You are totally welcome to write the whole question out if you want to, or you can write the answer in a whole sentence that includes parts of the question. So you could say, Chrysanthemum's classmates stopped making fun of her because, and then give your evidence. The second question says, what character trait best describes Chrysanthemum and why? So you're going to think of all of these character traits that we thought of that helps describe who Chrysanthemum is on the inside. To remind you, we said happy, proud, brave, loving, and hopeful. I want you to think of which character trait that we chose best describes chrysanthemum and point out evidence in the book that helps you make that decision. If there is a character trait that you think did not get mentioned in on the chart that you think is a better description of chrysanthemum, feel free to use that. You can use whichever one you want so long as you provide evidence, okay? All right, third grade, if you get your work done, you can email it to any of your teachers or text it to me. Feel free to put it on Flipgrid if you're in my class. Okay, have a great Friday. Talk soon.